If you want to go to an IP school, you cannot expect it to be like a regular secondary school. There is a different kind of bullying that goes on in elite schools that sometimes people don't really consider. It's a more unforgiving environment. Some people thrive, and some people wilt. People always like to talk about elite school culture of excellence, but I think the dark side is... Naga, I know it's still some years away for you and your kid doing PSLE. But let's just hypothetically say he get a 6. So that means 2 1s and 2 2s, which is quite good, right?
The total AL
total.
grade.
Okay. How would you go about the school selection process, as a parent?
As a parent, okay.
But I mean, you can't separate yourself as a parent from you as an educator. So you can amalgamate both and then tell me how would you go about doing it?
I don't know. Nowadays, I when I see my son's learning and all that, right? Of course, the teacher in me always comes out sometimes. Yeah, and then you can feel it. It's a teacher's voice, or how I talk to him, how I give him instruction sounds like a teacher. So I try to be aware of how I speak to him. Try to be more father-like, not teacher-like. So that's one thing. But as you said,
the Chinese will say the teacher is the father is also the teacher.
In Tamil also there's the proverb for that. Yeah, of course. But I think I am very conscious about it. I actually try to not sound like a teacher with him. You know what I mean? Especially when I do he can sense it also because I do online teaching sometimes from home, right? And then he can see what's my teacher's voice. He'd say, Appa, you don't sound like that when you talk to me. He got say a few times. So I understand. But coming back to the point of school selection for my son, right? I mean, he's 5, so I've not really thought about it yet. But I think that I will really look at his ability. If he's good, or if he can cope what so-called good schools or elite schools are doing, I think I will send him there. But if he's not able to, that means that's when the educator in me is useful, right? I'll be able to see whether he'll be able to cope or not. If he's not able to cope, then I think I might not opt for it. Basically.
What do you mean by able to cope? What's the concern? What's the fear there?
Okay, coming back to this elite schools, good schools thing, right? I think there's a lot of this thing called independent learning. That means you have to do it yourself. I mean, I've been a school teacher before. I didn't teach in a specifically elite school. So I think there was a lot of hand-holding, a lot of instructions, deliberate monitoring to be done on the teacher's end so that the kids learn. Because I think the general population of the students are like that at that age. So I had to do that as a teacher. So that will not be available, I think, in elite schools, because I think students who go there already by then, they should be able to learn by themselves. They don't need deliberate teaching. Rather, they just go, they are just okay with the learning being facilitated by the teacher. That means they are given a task, they're given simple instructions, and they are able to go through the task with their own processes they come up with, and then they're able to achieve the outcome without much checkpoints by the teacher or without much intervention by the teacher. I thought that's how elite schools are. If my son is able to do that, I can sense it, I will send him to elite school.
I think on the academic side, maybe sometimes people don't know what they're signing up for, right? So
exactly,
when I was in Raffles, what I would describe the year 1 to 4 environment to be like is that actually it was pretty chill. Maybe it's because of the way me and my friends decide to treat the whole process. Because as I like to tell my wife, there was a point where I ran out of movies to watch at Golden Village. That's what I mean by chill. But don't get me wrong, we actually had a lot of fun stuff to do in Raffles. It's not like there are no tests. I mean, I wasn't doing, if I'm being very honest, I wasn't doing very, very well in the secondary school years, right? It was okay, but I was IP, right? So it didn't matter, right?
Yeah,
but you see, here's the thing, right? Which is, I think if you want to go to an IP school, which for simplicity, let's just call the IP schools the elite schools, okay? If you want to go to an IP school, especially for Raffles, which is the one I have the most intimate understanding of, you cannot expect it to be like a regular secondary school. And it's definitely not going to be like primary school because we did a lot of fun stuff, but there's not so much teaching.
Yep.
And the onus is put on us to kind of decide how well you want to do and how hard you want to study. Because I was like in the middling range. I was like a 60 plus kind of student, right? Which is not bad. I mean, I'm a like B, but my classmates are like getting 80 and 90, right? So it's good in the sense that everyone makes their own choices.
True.
You know, we have really fun stuff like for English classes, a lot of times maybe our test for that term is a debate.
Yeah.
Or we do a project. Or like we always remember this physics project that we did in school. We call it the Mac ship project. We had to cut a styrofoam board. We make a ship, and then we get this really strong magnets, put batteries, and then the boat can move in water.
Wow.
So we have a lot of stuff like that. You see, but the thing is, there's not so much emphasis on like classroom teaching. I mean, there is lah, but it's not a lot of teaching and testing as people might imagine. People might think that elite school is a lot of drilling. Actually, it's not.
It's not.
There's a lot of like, we had a lot of like, you know, this external companies coming in also and giving us extra leadership workshops. I remember having like this econs workshop, right, in Sec 4. Yeah. That was like my first contact with the subject. And we got a lot of like interesting stuff. And the thing is, if you want to be in this kind of environment, like you said, you have to be quite independent.
Correct.
Or you accept, like I guess my parents did, that because it's IP, right? Then you don't need to do that well. As long as you can go JC and then you do A-levels, it's fine. I think that's the right spirit to approach the whole thing. You can't want to go to IP school and be like, I want to get A-star all the time. And like, you know, why is the teacher not teaching? I think that's not the right like mindset. Because that's not what it's designed to do. IP programs are designed to stretch you. It's designed to help you learn things that you might not have otherwise encountered. And I think that's the true value of being in an elite school.
Yeah, like what you said, all this extra stuff which they did, the workshop and, you know, the projects, all that, these are on top of the basic learning. We have to clear that first. So basic learning, though, the basic subjects, the maths, the science, the humanities and the languages, the basic stuff are already there.
Or at least it's assumed to be there.
Yeah,
they assume
right?
that if you're not there, you will do something about it.
If you're not there, you wouldn't even be in this school. You see what I mean? That's what I think.
You see, I think that's where we always talk about on the margin, right?
Yes.
It's an econs thing, okay, on the margin. But that way of thinking is instructive because at the margin, there are some people who are not that independent.
Yes.
There are some people who kind of hard mark their way into Raffles, which is fine. But you need to understand that there's a bit of a system change. I mean, I had really mugger friends in Raffles too, right? And that's fine. You know, like I said, I see it more as everyone picks their own poison, you know.
Okay.
Over there, they're not going to spoon feed you. Are not going to be like, hey, you know, like read the history textbook kind of thing. You know, the teacher will come to class, you know, we watch a video, you know, we have a discussion and that's it. You're left on your own and you got to figure it out.
Yep. So I mean, I was not from elite school as a student, slightly above average kind of a school. But I needed at that time at secondary, I think more my independent learning came from in JC only. So in secondary school, I still needed the deliberate instruction, a bit of supervision, a bit of guidance, more than what elite schools offer to actually get me to that O level. So I think different students, different styles. So if you can do all this learning by yourself, or when there's a test, you would know how to go through the process of learning and preparing for the test yourself. You don't need like your parents to buy you assessments, ask you to do what page to what page, which question to do and all that. Then I think you can go to elite school where you can do other things because they have used the resources to enrich you on other things. Yeah. On top of the basic learning stuff. That's the main thing. But I think as a student from non-elite school, I needed that basic also to be a bit more structured for me and guided so that I needed that. So I think coming back to the issue of whether everybody should
you be aiming for that,
should be aiming for elite school might not be. Because I think you just really have to see what your child, as a parent, I mean, you really have to see whether your child can do the independent learning or not. Because the elite schools are not going to really go down to the basics and get a kid up.
No, yeah.
Because they're
That's
not.
absolutely true.
They're not going to help you there.
Yeah.
Because if you fall through the cracks, I would say in a crude way, right? You fall through the cracks there.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's the sad truth at the moment. So if you are unsure whether your kid can survive or not, I really advise don't push it. Don't push your kid to that area. Yeah. Try to be a bit more safer. Try to go to a normal school. Then I think it will actually help your kid also. You can do the basic stuff. If your kid is able to do more than that, then it's a safer environment to play your game there, rather than you go to elite school and then you're not able to do the basic stuff yourself. And at the same time, if you're not able to do the basic stuff, then what's the point of doing on top of that, all this enriching stuff? There's no point. Exactly. So I think that's where you have to make a decision.
I think the other thing as well, apart from academics, right? So I think the academics part's pretty clear. The other thing really is the culture. I think a lot of people get a culture shock when they go to a top school. I must admit it was kind of like that for me also, because I was from a rather neighborhood primary school. And so there was a bit of culture shock. There was a bit of an adjustment. But one of the ways I like to tell this whole culture story is by describing what I observed in JC. So I always share this story with my students, right, from other schools. And I tell them, I remember walking into the RJ, as it was called back then, canteen, on the morning of one of our first common tests, which was probably March, because we still used to have common tests back then in March, right? I walk into the canteen in the morning. Everyone waits in the canteen before you go upstairs for assembly. And the canteen was quiet. Ooh. The canteen was quiet not because there was no one there. The canteen was quiet because everyone was there, but everyone was studying. And I think that's the kind of subtle culture of excellence, if you want to call it, that you get from elite school. Because if all your friends are disciplined, like, in exam season, you try to get your friends to play Dota with you, it's never going to happen.
Nobody's going to play.
Minority, right? But so we play a lot outside of, exam season, but in and around exam season, like, I would say at least initially, I wanted to play, then I realized no one's going to play with me. So I kind of just had to go with the flow. And I think that's really good, right? That's the subtle cultural immersion that you get. And people always like to talk about elite school culture, and I feel like the culture is really ground up. Yep. It's just made up of the people that are there and how they are like, and there is this benefit of, having those values rub off you. But I think the dark side is you got to ask yourself whether that kind of as people like to call it, a pressure cooker environment is healthy for you. Because some people thrive and some people wilt. And I say some people thrive because there are a lot of DSA classes and DSA kids in Raffles.
Of course.
Which means that they come in by right on not such strong academic footing.
Of course.
But some of them still get straight A's eventually at A levels. And I will chalk it down to the culture, of course, to the teaching, but just really being part of that process where academic excellence is emphasized.
Okay, coming back to the issue, right? I like the whole this example you gave of the canteen being silent, everybody was studying, right? So I was from a sort of above average kind of a school, right? Secondary school. But then, of course, I cleared my O-levels and I went to JC. So, of course, a good JC during my time. Okay, SJC is reputable at the time, so I was very happy going there. So it's a different culture, right? In Fairfield, or my secondary school, I was always asked to consistent studying, constant practice, and all that was very important. That's the approach everybody takes. But then when I went to ACJC, it was a bit more different. Everybody had a good, it's a holistic kind of thing, we play, we do our CCA, there was sports and everything. But as you said, when it came to the exam season, everybody sit down, everybody studied, everybody was very focused, and we all achieved. So, but it took me some time to actually get used to that process. How come suddenly everybody just shifts?
Yeah.
But I think my other friends from other elite schools previously, I think that's how they function or they learn. So it was normal for them, but it took me some time to get adjusted to it. Like, how come people are not studying at some point in the year, and then suddenly during the exam or test season, and then everybody studies and then everybody does well. So after some time, I realized how to do it. So again, it comes back to the point of culture. So I adapted myself to the culture and learned how this is done. And then I got used to it and I did it. And I think I achieved well from that process also. So I think, again, being in an elite school or good school, it's also, there's one benefit of it, because it's like you get adapted to a different kind of environment and you go with the flow. Yeah. I mean, it might be called herd behavior, but I mean, in this instance, is a positive,
good kind of herd behavior.
Good herd behavior, if you call it that way. So I think when you join people with the good habits and all that, you become... you take up that habit also.
Do you feel that there was also elitism in JC?
Elitism in my JC, I don't think so. I think it's more like this culture. Basically, if you call this culture elitism, I don't know. I would say I found this, there was a culture shock. When I didn't see people constantly studying. There were, as you said, there were muggers. One or two people will always sit, will always study, will always do their work diligently and regularly. But I think majority didn't. They will be studying here and there, but during exam, they will really study. And then I went into that, I took up that approach and it worked for me. So I think I did pretty well after some time when I got used to this process. So, I mean, I wouldn't say it's wrong to always consistently study also. I mean, that's wrong to say that there are people who also do well if you don't consistently study, but you are mindful when to stop playing or relaxing and study. So then I think you can go to an elite school.
I think some parents like actually want their kids to go in there for precisely this reason, which is all the good kids are together and then you can study. But I was talking about the dark side, right? So one thing is it's quite pressurizing. Because if everyone's studying and you're not, then you know, maybe your personality is just different, right? And that just doesn't speak to you. And you kind of feel like, you know, you don't fit into this broader and more ambitious culture. And I think the scarier thing for a lot of people, actually, when I talk about elitism, is that when you put a lot of smart kids together, it's a more unforgiving environment. Like people call you out for being stupid in class. And it's, you see, I don't know what, I don't know what it was like in you know, Fairfield, for example. But it's more unforgiving, lah. Like, you know, people will latch onto your mistake and they'll laugh at you. And if you take it in the right spirit, it's fine. But some people can't take it, right? And then it becomes bullying. And I think that there is a different kind of bullying that goes on in elite schools that sometimes people don't really consider. And that's it. That's part of the pressure cooker thing, you know. That's part of the whole... You might not realize what you're signing up for when you go for, you know, the better institutions. Yeah.
So basically, you can classify students according to this category, right? One is that you are an average student, a normal, regular one, and then you go to a normal school. Then nothing much, you know. You just it's a normal for you. But if you're a good student, that means very independent, and then you go to elite school, then you think the culture is great for you and all that. So the only problem is that if you're an average student and you go to elite school,
as in average, not in terms of grades. Like you did well enough to get into elite school.
But you just like...
But you feel normal.
And you feel normal. If you call that normal. I mean, you just... you have a regular learning approach to studying and all that, right? So then, I think that's when you have to be mindful. Whether your regular learning approach, you're able to achieve the same as the people who are in the elite schools or not. If you're not, and then if you feel that there is a pressure cooker effect, as you said, or you feel like you are losing out in the race there, and you feel stressed about it, then I think elite school, you have to really think twice before choosing it as an option.
I think the emotional consideration is a very important one, because I actually just found out that the phrase "big fish, little pond" actually, I think it came up. It was invented by Australian psychologists. Like, you know, there were studies about, like, you know, how
I thought it was a Chinese proverb, actually. Was it? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, these languages borrow from each other, right? But apparently there was a study, and the thing is, they actually found that, I mean, depending on the kind of kid that you are, for some people, like, the pressure really gets to them. Like, being in a really competitive environment actually makes them feel worse about themselves because it's just very hard to stand out. And I think that's true for a lot of... not a lot, but I think that's true for some kids that make it to like Raffles and Nanyang and Hwa Chong, because you might be the top student in your primary school, but you go there, you're one out of like 200 top students, right? And you're not that special anymore. And it might sound very narcissistic to talk about it through these lenses, but I think your own sense of self-worth as a child and as an adult, I mean, it's all important. So how you perceive yourself is quite important. And I think that's something that we as parents should consider. I mean, everyone wants their kid to go to elite school. Of course, I would love my kid to go to my school, right? But I'm also aware that ultimately he has to make the choice. I can only provide the facts and provide the counseling as his father and and my understanding of his personality. But at the end of the day, they have to pull the trigger, because through so many years of teaching, I've seen kids who come from so-called more average secondary schools. They do spectacularly well. Like, I have great respect for my students who actually made it to like Nanyang JC. I think Nanyang JC is fantastic, right? And it's a non-IP JC. So a lot of the kids that go there were from non-IP schools, did phenomenally well. And wow, I tell you, every single year, the Nanyang JC kids that I get, they're spectacular. They're really hardworking. They're really smart.
True.
And it's okay. You know, you didn't need to go to Raffles to go to Nanyang, right? And you could still do really well. Like one of my ex-students from 2-3 years back, studying medicine right now, right? You don't need the IP elite route. You just kind of need to pick the best route for yourself. Or another one of my students, very memorable, normal secondary school, went to CJ, valedictorian of the art stream, right? Like why do you always need to, and he's like I think he's a scholar right now, you know, with the ministry or something. So you don't really need that tried and tested. I don't know, I sound hypocritical. Maybe after the episode, I go home, my wife's like, don't lie. Don't lie to everyone.
You're sending your son there.
But the truth is, I do genuinely believe in that. Like, I'll be okay with it. You know, I think you just need to find the environment that will allow you to thrive. And I think that's an important consideration.
So basically, it's understanding yourself and your kid, right?
Yeah.
I always tell myself, I mean, maybe when I had my son, I always thought it's a wrong thing to say, right? It's an extension of yourself. Don't always think your son or your child is an extension of yourself because it's not the same. Yeah. So I think my son and myself have quite distinct personality differences. So the learning process, how he perceives himself, how my personality might not be the same. So that will actually make me think twice before choosing the school for him, because he might or might not thrive. I mean, he's at 5 years old. I have not like really thought can see where he is in terms of learning and all that. But I think eventually I will look at his personality, whether he will be able to thrive, as you said, in an elite school. If not, then I think a regular school is good, because if you choose the correct school for your kid, right, I really think that they will be able to do very well, because the processes are in place for them to thrive, not just survive, you see. It's very important.
Yeah.